What's up, you guys? Stoopzz back again with another video. And in today's video, I'm going to be continuing the series where I'll be going over various classes in the game that many of you suggest that you're struggling with. Now, similar to my Frost DK guide, I'll be covering the Havoc Demon Hunter, and I'll be showing you guys how you can counter these classes, whether that be in battlegrounds, arenas, or anything else really. Many of you asked for me to cover the Affliction Warlock, or Warlocks in general, but mainly Affliction, and I will be looking to do that in the future. Probably the next episode. I just have to figure out how I'm going to do that, as I do not own a 110 Affliction Warlock, but I'll do what I can and see what I can do to try and give that content out there for you guys. Now, this is my second time recording this video because I did not press the record button, and I'm sure many of you can't relate, but it's so frustrating. But I'm just excited to do this right this time. Now, just like in my last video, I'll be going over the Demon Hunter offensive abilities. I'll be breaking down their defensive abilities, and then I'll also be giving my general thoughts of the class and what you guys should look out for in summarization. I'll be summarizing what you guys should look out for. Now, hopping into the offensive abilities first, I know there is this common stigma with the Demon Hunter that they're these mouth breathers, easy class to play. You know, I'm not here to debate that. What I am here to say is that there are multiple builds to the Havoc Demon Hunter that you should look out for and that you should understand, and they do all stem from their offensive builds. Now, these three abilities, similar to multiple classes, every class has like one ability that will define their whole build. The Demon Hunter has three. The first one being Chaos Blades, the second one being Fel Barrage, and the third one being Demonic. The more popular ones, or more prevalent ones that you'll see all the way up to about 2400, not always, but you will see the most prevalent is Fel Barrage and then Chaos Blades. Now, I'm going to start off with Fel Barrage as it is the more common ability and probably, in my opinion, the one that's often overlooked in terms of what you can do to kind of counter this build. Now, Fel Barrage is that ability that you've seen time and time again. It's where the Demon Hunter will either stun the target, activate Fury of the Illidari, leap away, and then use these little missiles that deal a lot of cleave damage. Well, what's important to understand about Fel Barrage is that it's not only a 1 minute cooldown, but every time the Demon Hunter does damage, it has a chance to reduce the cooldown of this ability by 5 seconds. So even though it's a 1 minute cooldown, he can use it a lot more often. Now, I also want to point out that it is splash damage, so it's very important not to stack anywhere near anyone really while he has Chaos Nova open, because if you are stacked or a double melee and you're on top of somebody, that's going to allow him to do that cleave damage, and you really can't avoid that altogether. And it's hard to track this ability because it's always getting reduced in its cooldown timer because he's dealing damage all the time. But it's often coupled with Chaos Nova, that AoE stun, and Fury of the Illidari, so it would be wise to track Fury of the Illidari or Chaos Nova, because you can predict, hey, he's looking to set up, he's looking to use his Chaos Nova and get 2 of us caught, or even 3 of us caught. Getting 2 or 3 people caught in that wombo combo is one of the worst things you can do versus a Havoc Demon Hunter. So I will be putting a link to a video that I made in the past where it covers on how you can track various cooldowns from enemy classes using Omnibar. I highly recommend you guys check out that video. I think it'll be really informative and helpful to many of you who are not using Omnibar in that way. Now, one thing I want to note here is that Fel Barrage is a channeled ability. It's a casted ability. It can be interrupted. It can also do damage. You can opt to throw a glaive or dash back during that time, but it can be interrupted. So interrupting Fel Barrage is extremely important, especially if you have like a shaman on your team who has a consistent short interrupt like Wind Shear, whether that be a Resto Shaman, an Enhanced Shaman, or an Ellie Shaman. You can shear probably a lot more often than you're already doing, and just looking to shear the healer versus a Demon Hunter who is using Fel Barrage is not a good idea. Stopping Fel Barrage is extremely important because it will mitigate and stop a lot of his incoming consistent burst damage, and it will allow you to save your defensive cooldowns, like your own Ancestral Wall if you're a shaman. Paladins have a wall. Every class has some kind of wall ability, a defensive ability that shields them or reduces the amount of damage they take. So what will often happen is the Demon Hunter will, maybe Fel Blade in the opener and get you guys stacked, throw out a glaive, Chaos Nova, Fury of the Illidari, he'll leap away, and he'll activate his Fel Barrage. He'll cleave all of you guys, he'll dash back in and continue doing damage. Now, if he was able to which is often the case if you're taking that insane amount of damage, which literally can almost one-shot you. I've gotten some insane openers with that combo on my Demon Hunter. He'll probably get your defensive cooldowns. And once he does that, he still hasn't used his metamorphosis. So he still has meta up. You're going to be taking a ton of damage and he's already got your wall from you. So it's very important to keep in mind a few things when it comes to Fel Barrage, which is the core ability of this build from the Demon Hunter. Number one, do not stack as much as possible versus a Demon Hunter. It's very, very important because a lot of his abilities, a lot of his damaging abilities are cleave, and that allows him to maximize his damage. Also, if you can't, or you can predict to pre-wall or use one of your defensives to reduce that amount of damage, because let's say you've taken all of that damage, do not wall after that. If you've taken that full Fel Barrage, Fury of Eldari, do not press your wall after unless you're completely dead, because following that is going to be a metamorphosis. So if you cannot pre-wall that or use your defensive predicting that he's going to do that, then try and get somebody to interrupt that Fel Barrage. Somebody who's not caught in that Chaos Nova. He might opt to use his Fel Barrage on a Fel Rush, so he'll dash through and then activate Fel Barrage, but most likely you're going to see this big wombo, a massive amount of damage coming from the Fury of Eldari setup into a Vengeful Retreat. Now, the question is, what is momentum, or why is he dashing or retreating away? Why is he leaping away and then using Fel Barrage? It's because of this core mechanic that most Demon Hunters take advantage of through multiple builds, and it's called momentum. Every time a Demon Hunter uses his Vengeful Retreat, so that little return ability that you just saw that slows the target, or his dash, he'll receive a buff for 4 seconds that increases the amount of damage he does by 20%. He'll have to either leap away and then Fel Barrage, or he'll dash through you and then activate Fel Barrage. But that wombo combo, I hate using that term, but I guess it's the best way, combination, whatever. That combination is often accompanied by Vengeful Retreat with the Chaos Nova, Fury of Eldari, Fel Barrage. He might not have to stun you, but if he doesn't stun you, then it can be interrupted. So keep that in mind. It's a good thing if he's not Chaos Novaing you, because then you can shear it or use your range interrupt. I'm not saying to kick every single Fel Barrage, but to be wise, especially if you're a shaman, to stop that. Now, going back to momentum, one thing you can do to counter this ability is not put your back to a wall, especially if you're a healer. Let's say the Demon Hunter is on top of you and you're just, by yourself and you're having to survive. Most importantly, or especially in twos, right? In twos, sometimes you're just left alone and nobody's helping you. If you put your back to a wall and you're not in the open, let's say this dummy was even closer to the wall, the Demon Hunter, all he has to do to keep this momentum buff up, which is very important, is just dash through you and he'll hit the wall and he's right back on top of you. He'll dash through you and he'll get right back on top of you, and there's not much of a gap closer. He can maintain that 20% damage increase much easier if there's some kind of obstacle preventing him from dashing too far, because if he dashes through you, he's all the way over here and either he's in a Fel Blade back, which is on a cooldown, or maybe he'll dash through you and then leap back. These are some noob tactics, but he'll have to try and reconnect at some point. Now, he can slow you and he can dash and then get Fel Blade back, which he'll do very often. But if you are putting yourself against the wall, it allows him to just dash through you and then reconnect rather easily and maintain that damage increase. Also, keep in mind that if you are kiting a Demon Hunter, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but if he's having to dash to reconnect, it kind of favors that build, because if you're blinking away from him, obviously it's better for the Demon Hunter, I'm sure, for you just to stand there. But if you are, blinking away from him a lot, he is able to capitalize on that momentum buff. So that is one thing to look out for when it comes to Fel Barrage momentum. Now that we've covered Fel Barrage and how you can interrupt that, how you can counter that by predicting it's about to happen, by tracking cooldowns, or just not stacking in general, another thing I want to talk about is Chaos Blades, which is a completely different build than Fel Barrage. Chaos Blades in itself is a different playstyle. Now, Chaos Blades can be covered with momentum, which you're familiar with now, or Nemesis. Nemesis is a 2-minute cooldown, and the way it works is he will mark a target with Nemesis, and for the next minute, he'll be dealing 15% increased damage to that target. Chaos Blade, similarly, is a 2-minute cooldown, and it lasts 18 seconds, and it will increase all damage the Demon Hunter does by 20% for 18 seconds, and it will also buff his attack damage and make it chaos. So keep that in mind for abilities that like mitigate physical damage. During Chaos Blades, his auto attack is still chaos damage. But the way it will work is he will very obviously mark a target with Nemesis. He'll wait for his Fury bar to be completely filled if he's, you know, good at his class or has an understanding of his class to maximize his damage during that time window. He will activate Nemesis, he'll pop meta, activate Chaos Blades, and he will just sit on top of you and spam Chaos Strikes over and over. He might, you know, Fell Blade or rush through you if your back's against the wall to generate additional Fury. But he's just going to be standing on top of you and trying to deal as much damage as he can to that target because he wants to stay on that target that has Nemesis. Now, he can opt to do Momentum, but you know how Momentum works. So Momentum might give him more consistent damage throughout the arena match or the fight, but Nemesis is a more single target bursty build. Chaos Blades Momentum allows him to kind of swap around and still deal damage, but if he marks you with Nemesis, you know that's the kill target. Countering this is kind of easier in my opinion than countering Fell Barrage. It's much more predictable because nothing reduces the cooldown of these abilities, unlike Fell Barrage, which you don't really know when it's up, whereas Nemesis Chaos Blades is on a 2-minute cooldown. You can track it. When he activates Chaos Blades or Nemesis, you know he's going to want to use his Metamorphosis, and then all you have to do is just try and lock him down during that time. So, number one, save your defensive cooldowns. Try and, you know, track this this situation or these cooldowns from the Demon Hunter. Use your defensive cooldowns during that time because he's not going to be dealing the most insane damage outside of this. He can still be a nuisance and deal damage, but he'll be doing some next level damage with Chaos Blades Nemesis, so you have to have something for that scenario. But on top of that, if you have polymorphs, fears, stuns, any lockdowns, roots, whatever, cyclones, try and lock down the Demon Hunter, and when you do this successfully, you really do mitigate a lot of its damage. So you'll see this in 3s, you'll see this in 2s. If you notice Chaos Blades, or you don't even see Fell Barrage, or you see Nemesis, you're gonna know that this is the build that he's running and how to counter it. So Fell Barrage, kind of hard to counter in terms of when he's going to use this combo, but Chaos Blades Nemesis, very predictable, deals a lot of damage, but I believe it's a lot easier to counter. Now the third build I'm going to be talking about today is one that you will not see very often. It's more of a tanky build. You will see it versus if you're like a double spellcaster comp or even a spellcaster comp and the Demon Hunter wants to sit on one target or stay in the fight, I should say, a lot longer. You'll see him run with Demonic. It's Demonic, often with Soul Rendering. He will probably use Demonic Appetite, and he might even opt to use Awaken the Demon. It just depends on the player, but the way this build works is there's nothing really you can essentially do to counter. It's just good to be aware of what he's doing. So the way this build works is every time the Demon Hunter is in Metamorphosis, he gains 70% lifesteal, life leech. The damage he does, he's going to be healing. He will also generate these orbs that you will see. These orbs will give him extra fury, and they will restore his health as well as his fury. So the more damage he can deal, the more he's going to lifesteal, and the more orbs he'll spawn, that will give him more fury, which in turn will give him more health. So it's very much a nuisance, and often it will be coupled with momentum, maybe even Fell Eruption, to be more of a nuisance and sit on a caster and prevent them from doing anything, and it's hard for them to deal damage. Now, the one thing you want to note that makes this build very unique is every time the Demon Hunter opts to use his Eye Beam, it will put him in the Metamorphosis state for 8 seconds. So he'll activate his Eye Beam and he'll stay in this demon form. When they activate it normally, they go into a demon form when they're using it, and then it stops and they go back out of it. But with this build, they stay in it for 8 seconds, which in turn will give him, once again, more lifesteal. That's what this whole build revolves around, so he can stay in the fight a lot longer. This will provide a lot of consistent damage for the Demon Hunter because already when he's in Metamorphosis, he's dealing more damage. His abilities get buffed, specifically Chaos Strike and Blade Dance. He'll just deal more damage. It's not as bursty as Fell Barrage or Chaos Blades. It's just more consistent damage. It reminds me a lot of like a Arms Warrior sitting on a target in D stance. It's still good damage. They still have Mortal Strike. The demonic build Demon Hunter can stay in the fight a lot longer. He'll be in meta much longer, so he'll be dealing more consistent damage, and it's harder to take him down. So if he's running this build, he's probably not the killed target. You can probably still kill him. I honestly recommend not focusing Demon Hunters in general. I feel like they're still good kill targets, but they have a lot of cooldowns, and similar to Windwalker monks, they're hard to lock down and they can kite for a while their healer is in CC. So try and see if there's another target you can focus. I'm not saying never target a Demon Hunter, but if he has Blur or he's running Nether Walk, he has Darkness, and he has this build, and he has Rain from Above or whatever it is, he has so many cooldowns to keep him alive, and he has lifesteal, it might not be the target to focus. So just keep in mind, if you don't see Fel Barrage, you don't see Chaos Blades, you don't see Nemesis, and you see him in meta, easiest telltale sign is if he activates his Eye Beam and he's in meta for a little while. Oh, he's running Demonic, he has lifesteal, he's going to be annoying, not going to be dealing too much insane burst damage, but he will be a nuisance. Now, of course, there's a lot more I can cover, but I want to keep this video shorter because I got a complaint last time. I just love to provide as much information as I can. Going on to our defensive abilities now, or utility spells for the Demon Hunter. The first one I want to talk about is Nether Walk and Desperate Instincts. Now, Nether Walk is that ability that you see Demon Hunters activate, and they become immune pretty much to all incoming damage for 5 seconds. That's one of their great defensive cooldowns. They also have Desperate Instincts. Now, Blur is a baseline Demon Hunter ability that I really like. Very similar to Evasion, it increases the Demon Hunter dodge chance by 50%, and it will also mitigate and reduce all damage by, I believe, 35% for 10 seconds on a 1 minute cooldown. So it's up very often. Now they can spec into Desperate Instincts, which makes it so that Blur will also reduce an additional 15% damage. So baseline is 35%. If with spec into Desperate Instincts, it's an additional 15%. So that makes it 50% damage reduction. Also, it will automatically trigger if the Demon Hunter falls below 35% health. So why is this good, or why is this important to understand? Well, if you stun a Demon Hunter, he can't activate Blur, so he's a good kill target with no trinket, similar to Karma for Windwalker monks. That's something you should be looking out for. If the target's stunned, who cares if he has Karma? He can't trinket, you kidney shot him, he can still die, he can't activate Karma. Well, with Desperate Instincts, you can't kill him in a stun if he has his Blur up, because it'll proc on its own. So you have to keep that in mind. If it triggers when he falls below 35% health, then you know he's running Desperate Instincts, which also means he doesn't have Nether Walk. Nether Walk is really frustrating to deal with because it's on a 2-minute cooldown, and it gives him 100% movement speed. So he'll activate the spell, he can't be hurt, and he can just run away, get all the way across the map, and then, dash away back to his healer, and it's on a 2-minute cooldown. He still will have Blur as well, which will also give him that damage reduction, baseline 35%, and he'll have that 50% dodge chance or evasion. So it's 2 defensive cooldowns. Personally, for me, I like Nether Walk more than Desperate Instincts. I'm just very careful with my trinket, and it gives me a wider variety of defensive utility versus just having a auto Blur, which is still really good. Now, one of the more important defensive spells that you should look to see from Demon Hunters is Cover of Darkness, or Darkness in general. Now, Cover of Darkness is what makes Darkness very powerful. Sometimes Demon Hunters opt for Solitude to increase the amount of damage they do. It just allows a Demon Hunter to get additional attack speed, Fury generation, if they're excluded by their allies within 15 yards. If they're singling out a target and they're staying on somebody's face, they might not opt to choose Cover of Darkness, and they'll pick Solitude. But when most Demon Hunters, myself included, I just always love Cover of Darkness because it's such a great team ability. You've seen Darkness, it drops this cloud, and baseline, it lasts 8 seconds, and it gives all allies within the cloud a 20% chance to avoid all damage. Now with Cover of Darkness, it gives them an additional 50% to avoid. So attacking into Darkness, which is, I believe, a 3-minute cooldown, is very, very bad. You need to see if he's using Big Darkness or Cover of Darkness, and you can tell also by the cloud. There's a cloud animation, and their colors differ based on what he's using, and you can also see the buff. There is a buff under the target. He has a defensive buff, and you'll see, oh, Cover of Darkness, damage reduction, but still attacking into Darkness is 20% avoidance, but with the additional 50%, it's almost useless to try and kill through it. You can, if the person's at 1%, I highly encourage you, or 2%, 5%, even 10% to try and kill through. Just don't dump all of your damage into that Darkness, because most likely it will be avoided. It will avoid chaos. It doesn't matter what it is. Anything that passes through that Darkness is going to be or have a chance to be avoided by 70%. So this is a great defensive utility from the Demon Hunter for the team, so keep that in mind. Now, Demon Hunters also have reverse magic, and I think a lot of players miss this ability. This ability is actually insane. I think it's a little overpowered, and no one talks about this, but it's a 1-minute cooldown. And the way it works is the Demon Hunter, they can reverse all harmful magical effects from all allies within 10 yards. And crazy enough, it'll send them back to the original caster. Now, what does this mean? The Demon Hunter can dash to his allies and reverse the dots, but more importantly and more oftenly used, it's used to reverse polymorphs, fears, silences, traps, any form of CC. So it's on a 1-minute cooldown. So every minute, a Demon Hunter can dash over to his friendly ally and then press one ability, and it will reverse a polymorph, a fear. If somebody's polyed and one person's feared or whatever it is, he can reverse both of them. He can reverse all dots, but he does lose a lot of damage. So there is another build, which kind of sucks to give up for this talent, but it's so good. Unending Hatred, he'll deal more damage, or he'll be generating more fury versus caster classes. So I don't want to get too deep into that. Choosing reverse magic will dampen his damage or hinder his damage when fighting against caster teams. However, it's too good to give up because Hammer of Justice, freezing trap, fears, polymorph, silences, things like that, reversing those abilities for your allies are huge. So I really recommend you track this cooldown. That's why I'm showing it to you today. If you don't know this, you're like, why did I just polymorph that target and then he got out? Or how come I just trapped that guy and he got out and there's no trinket? How did he get out of that? It will send that polymorph also back, so that's a telltale sign. But if you're not tracking it, I recommend that you do, because tracking reverse magic will save you a lot of headaches, and it will also allow you to start thinking about this cooldown in an aggressive way. So you might want to bait it out. Maybe you can poly him, get him to reverse that ability, and then that target's safe for a polymorph. Sometimes you might poly one guy or fear one guy or do whatever you can, Hammer of Justice, trap him, and then turn around and then not even focus on him anymore, and the Demon Hunter will dash over there, reverse it, and you're like, what just happened? So you need to track this, especially if you're a CC heavy comp. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is detainment versus rain from above. And you've probably seen rain from above. It's where the Demon Hunter leaps in the air, and I don't want to cover it too much. He just starts throwing these little meatball meteors down at the ground, and it's hard to hit him until he comes down back into range. You can line of sight those meatballs, so when he's throwing them at you, you can go behind a pillar. You can line of sight the Demon Hunter from those meatballs, but it's more of a defensive ability. What I want to talk about is detainment. The detainment buffs their paralysis ability, their CC ability. I know you've seen it before, where they create this little end cap. It puts you in a little bit of a chamber. It's their CC ability. Baseline, their imprison can be dispelled. However, with detainment, it cannot be dispelled, and that target is immune to all damage and healing during that time. Why is this important? Well, when fighting against a holy priest, or let's say you're an arcane mage, if a Demon Hunter is running their detainment ability, this buffed, they will paralysis you or imprison you right before your temporal shield goes off, your ray of hope goes off. Any cooldown that has a delayed heal, you can opt to use that right there. They can also imprison a target on their cocoon. So if they're attacking a target and that target cocoons themselves or bops themselves or whatever it is, you can imprison that target and they will not receive any healing during that time frame. Not only is it a defensive ability to stay alive or kite or CC something, but it's also a very aggressive offensive ability, because you can prevent a lot of incoming healing or completely throw somebody off when it comes to temporal shield, like I said earlier. But when it comes to the Demon Hunter, I know that people opt to think that they're a mindless class and they run all over the map, they do insane amounts of damage, and this is true, but there are some things you can do as a player to mitigate the amount of damage they're doing. If they're opting to use Fel Barrage and Momentum, you can try and mitigate that amount of damage they're doing during Fel Barrage, so you can save your defensive cooldowns for Metamorphosis. If he's using Chaos Blades and Nemesis or Chaos Blades Momentum, you'll try and CC him during that damage window, and it's a lot easier to manage. Demonic, now you're aware if he's using it, you know he's probably not a good option to kill, or he's not going to be dealing as much burst damage as the two other builds. But that's going to do for this video, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to give the video a thumbs up. If you have any more questions regarding the Demon Hunter or anything in general, you can leave them in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you guys right away. Try to miss me on my Twitch live stream where I answer all of your guys' questions in depth. Do not forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.